My name is Samantha, and at 34 years old, I never imagined I would be widowed with a critically injured child. That sunny Tuesday in April, my world imploded when David, my loving husband of 9 years, was killed instantly in a collision. When I called my parents sobbing that David was dead and our 7-year-old daughter Lily was in a coma, they said they were too busy at my brother Timothy's birthday celebration to come. As I share the most heartbreaking moment of my life, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop a comment below and subscribe if you want to hear how I found strength when my own family abandoned me. Growing up in suburban Minneapolis, I always felt like an afterthought in my own family. My parents Eleanor and Richard made no secret that my brother Timothy was their pride and joy. 3 years younger than me, Timothy could do no wrong in their eyes. His mediocre report cards were celebrated while my straight, as were expected. His Little League games were family events, while my dance recitals were often attended by just one parent, if any. I remember my 10th birthday party being canceled because Timothy had a mild cold. No rescheduling, just a small cake after dinner and a wrapped present that turned out to be a sweater 2 sizes too small. Meanwhile, Timothy had elaborate themed parties every year with clowns, magicians, or trips to amusement parks. My childhood diary entries read like a catalog of disappointments. The time my high school graduation ceremony was rushed because Timothy had a baseball game. The Christmas, when I received practical gifts like socks and school supplies, while Timothy got the latest gaming console. The countless times my achievements were acknowledged with a distracted, "That is nice, honey," while Timothy received effusive praise for the smallest accomplishments. I never understood what made me less worthy of their attention and love. I was a good student, never got into trouble, and tried desperately to win their approval. Nothing worked. As a teenager, I went through a brief, rebellious phase, thinking maybe negative attention would be better than none. Even that failed to shift their focus from Timothy. College was my escape. At the University of Minnesota, I finally found my place in the world. I studied nursing with a focus on pediatrics, driven by a desire to care for children, the way I wished someone had cared for me. In my sophomore year, I met David in an elective art history class. He was studying architecture, passionate about designing spaces that brought comfort and beauty to people. David noticed me in a way no one ever had before. He saw past my carefully constructed walls, the defensive humor, the instinct to downplay my own needs. On our third date, when I automatically deferred to his restaurant choice, saying, "I do not really care where we eat," he gently called me out. "I think you do care, Samantha. I want to know what you want." I burst into tears, right there in his car. That moment marked the beginning of my healing. David became my rock, my advocate, the first person who seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. When I introduced him to my parents 6 months later, he witnessed their dynamic firsthand. After an entire dinner where they interrogated him about his career prospects, but asked me nothing about my studies, he was stunned. "Is it always like that?" he asked afterward. "Pretty much my whole life," I admitted. Despite their treatment of me, David encouraged maintaining a relationship with my parents. "They are still your family," he would say. "Maybe they will change. And if not, we will build our own family where everyone is valued." We married after graduation, a small ceremony where my parents spent most of the time introducing Timothy to David's extended family, bragging about his business degree and job offers. David squeezed my hand throughout the reception, a silent reminder that I mattered to him. We moved to Seattle for David's job at a prestigious architecture firm. The distance from Minneapolis provided both a physical and emotional buffer from my family. Our calls became less frequent holidays, more peaceful. When I gave birth to our daughter Lily 7 years ago, my parents visited for exactly 2 days before flying home for one of Timothy's amateur hockey games. David built a successful career designing sustainable community buildings. I worked part-time at Seattle Children's Hospital, finding fulfillment in helping young patients and their families navigate difficult times. We diligently bought a charming craftsman home in a family-friendly neighborhood and created the warm, supportive household I had always craved. Lily grew into a vibrant, creative little girl with her father's warm brown eyes and artistic talent. She filled our home with laughter and colorful drawings that David proudly displayed in his office. Every milestone, every school performance, every skinned knee was given the attention and care it deserved. I maintained obligatory contact with my parents' monthly phone calls and annual visits at Christmas. David would gently remind me to call them on their birthdays or anniversaries, always the more forgiving one. People can only give what they know how to give, he would say. I did not fully agree but appreciated his compassion. Last Christmas, we announced plans for a summer trip to Disney World, Lily's dream vacation. My parents immediately mentioned that Timothy and his girlfriend might be getting engaged around then, so they would be busy with engagement party planning. David just smiled and said, "That is wonderful for Timothy. We will send a nice gift." That was David always taking the high road. Later that night, he held me while I cried, frustrated that even my daughter's happiness was secondary to my brother's life events. "We will give Lily the magical experience she deserves," he promised. "Our family is strong because everyone in it is valued." We spent the next few months planning our Disney trip, researching rides appropriate for Lily's age, and saving for special experiences like character breakfasts. David even designed a custom autograph book for Lily to collect signatures from Disney princesses. The trip was scheduled for June, just 2 months away. We had no idea that our family would be shattered before we ever got there. April 17th started like any ordinary Tuesday. David made blueberry pancakes for breakfast, his specialty that always made Lily giggle when he flipped them with exaggerated flair. I remember teasing him about getting pancake batter on his tie as he kissed me goodbye. Lily had draped herself around his legs, not wanting him to leave for work. "Be good for Mom and Mrs. Wilson today," he said, kneeling to hug her. "I will be home for dinner, and we can work on your science project." "Promise?" Lily asked, holding out her pinky finger. "Pinky promise," he replied, linking his finger with hers. Those were the last words they ever exchanged. I replay them in my mind, constantly grateful, at least for that final loving moment between them. I dropped Lily at our neighbor Mrs. Wilson's house, who watched her after school until I got home from my shift at the hospital. My workday was busy, but routine checking on patients, administering medications, consoling worried parents. The pediatric oncology ward, where I worked, was often emotionally draining, but also rewarding when treatment succeeded or when I could bring comfort to families going through their darkest times. At 3:15 that afternoon, my supervisor came to find me with an unusual expression on her face. "Samantha, you need to come to the office right away," she said, her voice strained. "There has been an accident." My first thought was that Lily had been hurt at school, but the grave look in my supervisor's eyes told me it was worse than a playground incident. In the small conference room, the hospital chaplain was waiting alongside the head nurse. "There has been a serious car accident," the chaplain said gently. "Your husband and daughter were involved. An ambulance is bringing them here now." My mind struggled to make sense of the information. But Lily is at Mrs. Wilson's, David is at work. There must be some mistake. The head nurse shook her head. David picked up Lily early from Mrs. Wilson's. Apparently he had a surprise for her, some father-daughter time. Their car was hit by a commercial truck that ran a red light on Madison Street. The room seemed to tilt and spin around me. I remember gripping the edge of the table, my nurse training kicking in, as I forced myself to breathe deeply to avoid passing out. "How bad?" I managed to ask. The silence that followed told me everything. The chaplain finally spoke. They are doing everything they can. The emergency team will be here any minute. I ran to the emergency department still in my scrubs, pushing past colleagues who reached out with concerned faces. When the ambulance arrived, I saw them wheeling in two gurneys. The smaller one held Lily, her face obscured by an oxygen mask, her body frighteningly still. The paramedics were performing CPR on David. A doctor I knew well, Doctor. Rivera intercepted me before I could follow them into the trauma bay. Samantha, I am so sorry, she said, her eyes filled with tears. David did not make it. The impact was on the driver's side. He died instantly. Her words hit me like physical blows. I doubled over a primal wail escaping my throat that I did not recognize as my own voice. But through my shock, one desperate thought emerged. Lily, I gasped. She is critical but alive. The trauma team is assessing her now. She has a severe head injury and internal bleeding. They are taking her straight to surgery. The next hours passed in a blur. I signed consent forms with a shaking hand. Colleagues I normally worked alongside now treated me with the gentle care reserved for families in crisis. Someone brought me water I could not drink. Someone else guided me to a private waiting area. At some point, I realized I needed to call my parents. Despite our strained relationship, they were Lily's grandparents and David's in-laws. This was the kind of moment when families were supposed to come together. Surely they would drop everything for this. I dialed with trembling fingers, each ring increasing my anxiety. When my mother answered with a cheerful hello, I could hear party sounds in the background, laughter and music. Mom, I choked out, my voice breaking. There has been a terrible accident. David is dead. Lily is in surgery. I need you. Please, come. There was a pause, then my mother's voice, slightly lowered but still casual. Oh, Samantha, that is awful. But we are in the middle of Timothy's 30th birthday party. Everyone is here, we have catering, and Timothy is about to open his gifts. I could not believe what I was hearing. Mom, did you hear me? David is dead. My husband is dead. Your granddaughter might not survive the night. I need my family. I understand, dear, but we cannot just leave right now. Timothy has been planning this party for months. Maybe we can come next weekend, or your father could come tomorrow, if things are still serious. If things are still serious, as if my widowhood and Lily's fight for life might somehow resolve themselves overnight. Never mind, I whispered, hanging up. I sat there, phone in hand, utterly alone in my grief. A nurse found me an hour later, still staring at the wall. She gently explained that Lily's surgery was ongoing, that the neurosurgeon was doing everything possible to reduce the swelling in her brain, that they had stopped the internal bleeding, but she remained in critical condition. They are putting her in a medically induced coma to give her brain time to heal, she explained. It helps reduce the pressure and prevent further damage. When will she wake up? I asked. We do not know yet. Days, possibly weeks. Her injuries are very severe, Samantha. I was taken to see David's body. He looked peaceful, almost as if he were sleeping, except for the unnatural stillness and the small cut above his right eyebrow. I stroked his still warm face, ran my fingers through his hair, and kissed his lips one last time. I placed his wedding ring in my pocket next to my heart. I will take care of Lily, I promised him. I will make sure she knows how much you loved her. That night I slept in a chair beside Lily's bed in the pediatric ICU, her tiny form dwarfed by machines and monitors. My colleagues brought me clean clothes, food I could not eat, and offers of help I could barely process. Dr. Wilkins, the neurosurgeon, explained that the next 48 hours would be critical. All we could do was wait and pray that her young brain would fight its way back. I called my in-laws, David's parents, who lived in Florida. Unlike my parents, they immediately made arrangements to fly to Seattle despite their advanced age and health issues. They would arrive the following afternoon. As night fell on the worst day of my life, I realized I truly understood what it meant to be utterly alone. The hospital fell quiet with only the beeping of monitors and the soft footsteps of night shift nurses. I held Lily's limp hand, watching her chest rise and fall with each mechanical breath, and tried to imagine how we would survive this if she survived at all. The universe had taken my husband, my daughter hung by a thread, and my own parents could not be bothered to leave a birthday party. The foundation of my life had crumbled in an instant, leaving nothing but rubble and the terrifying uncertainty of what morning would bring. The days following the accident blurred together in a haze of grief and fear. I existed in a strange limbo between the pediatric ICU, where Lily remained unconscious, and the overwhelming tasks that death demands of the living. David's parents, Martha and George, arrived the next day, as promised, their faces lined with shock and sorrow. Unlike my own parents, they immediately stepped into supportive roles, despite their own devastating grief. Martha sat with Lily while I met with funeral directors. George helped contact David's colleagues and friends. They brought me food, made sure I showered, and held me when the waves of grief became too powerful to bear alone. "Have your parents arrived yet?" Martha asked gently on the second day. "They are not coming," I said, the words still bitter in my mouth. Timothy's birthday party was more important. Martha's face registered shock, then a deep sadness. She squeezed my hand but said nothing, respecting my pain without adding judgment. Later I overheard her telling George in hushed tones, "I cannot imagine choosing a party over being here for her." Neither could I, and the wound of their absence cut deeper than I could express. A police officer came to the hospital to explain the accident details. The driver of the commercial truck had run a red light while texting. Traffic cameras had captured the entire incident. David had no chance to avoid the impact. The officer mentioned that the trucking company's insurance would likely offer a settlement given the clear liability. He gave me the contact information for a victim's advocate who could help with legal matters. David's firm sent representatives with condolences and practical support. They assured me his life insurance policy would be processed quickly and offered to handle the paperwork. Colleagues from the hospital organized a meal train and childcare for when, not if, Lily recovered. Friends I had not seen in months appeared with offers of help, their faces stricken with the uncomfortable helplessness that accompanies another's tragedy. My phone remained conspicuously silent from Minneapolis. No calls from my parents, no text messages asking about Lily's condition. The absence spoke volumes. Planning David's funeral while Lily's life hung in the balance felt surreal. How could I choose coffins and hymns when I did not know if I would soon be planning a second, smaller funeral? The pediatric neurologist, Dr. Chen, offered cautious hope, noting small improvements in Lily's brain activity, but warned the path to recovery would be long and uncertain. "Children's brains are remarkably resilient," he said. "But we need to prepare for the possibility of lasting effects. Right now, we focus on keeping her stable and giving her brain time to heal." I nodded, clinging to any fragment of hope. Each day, I split my time between funeral arrangements and Lily's bedside, reading her favorite stories, playing her favorite music, and describing the cards and drawings her classmates had sent. The child life specialist encouraged this, saying that coma patients often could hear, even if they could not respond. "Keep talking to her," she urged. "Your voice is her anchor." The funeral was held 6 days after the accident. David's colleagues filled the church, along with our neighbors, friends, and his extended family who had flown in from across the country. The architecture firm closed for the day in his honor. Former clients sent flowers and cards describing how David's designs had improved their lives. His best friend Marcus delivered a eulogy that captured David's kindness, creativity, and unwavering integrity. My parents did not attend. No explanation, no flowers, not even a card. Their absence created a visible void that people noticed but politely avoided mentioning. David's Aunt Susan, however, was less diplomatic. "Where are your folks?" she asked at the reception. When I explained, her face hardened. "That is inexcusable. Simply inexcusable." I did not have the emotional energy to defend them. There was no defense. The day after the funeral, I met with a lawyer specializing in wrongful death cases. The trucking company, eager to avoid a lengthy public trial, given the driver's negligence, had already offered a substantial settlement. The figure was staggering enough to cover Lily's medical expenses, her future care, and our financial security for years to come. I signed the papers in a daze, thinking how David would have wanted Lily's future protected. "This will not bring him back," the lawyer said gently, "but it will ensure you do not have to worry about finances during this terrible time." That evening, after another day at Lily's bedside with no change in her condition, I returned home to an empty house that no longer felt like home. David's coffee mug still sat on his desk. Lily's backpack hung on its hook by the door. Half-finished architectural drawings lay where he had left them, projects that would never be completed. I sat on our bed, surrounded by his clothes that still smelled like him, and finally allowed myself to fully break down. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, echoing through the empty rooms. I screamed into his pillow, railed against the injustice, begged for him to come back, pleaded with any deity who might be listening to at least spare my daughter. My neighbor Karen heard my cries and came over, sitting silently beside me until the storm passed. She brought dinner I could not eat and cleaned up dishes I had left unwashed for days. "Small steps," she said. "Just breathe and take small steps." On day 9, Lily squeezed my hand. It was faint, possibly reflexive, but Dr. Chen was encouraged. They began gradually reducing her sedation, monitoring her brain activity closely for any signs of distress. Each positive report felt like a tiny light in the vast darkness I was traversing. By day 12, Lily was breathing on her own, though she remained unconscious. The doctors spoke cautiously of meaningful recovery rather than if she wakes up. I clung to these subtle shifts in language like lifelines. Through it all, the silence from Minneapolis continued. No calls asking about Lily's condition, no offers of help, nothing. The childhood pattern of being overlooked had evolved into something far more painful in adulthood, a complete abandonment during the worst crisis of my life. Then on day 14, everything changed. My phone rang with my parents' number. After 2 weeks of silence, they were finally reaching out. Despite everything, a small, childish part of me felt relieved. Perhaps they had realized the magnitude of their failure and were calling to make amends. I could not have been more wrong. The call from my parents was brief and oddly formal. My mother simply said they were in Seattle and would like to stop by my house that afternoon. No questions about Lily's condition, no expressions of sympathy, just a notification of their impending visit. I agreed, too emotionally exhausted to do otherwise. I left Lily's side for only the 3rd time since the accident, assuring her I would return quickly. David's mother, Martha, promised to stay with her and call immediately if there was any change. The drive home felt surreal, the spring sunshine and blooming cherry trees along my street, an offensive contrast to the bleakness I carried within. When my parents' rental car pulled into the driveway, I watched from the living room window, trying to prepare myself emotionally. My father looked the same as always, his posture rigid, his face impassive. My mother fussed with her hair before exiting the car, more concerned with appearances than the gravity of the situation. I opened the door before they could knock, standing silently as they entered. No hugs were offered or expected. "Samantha, you look terrible," my mother said. eyeing my unwashed hair and the dark circles under my eyes. "Have you been sleeping at all?" "Not much," I replied flatly. "Spending nights in a hospital chair while my daughter fights for her life is not conducive to rest." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Yes, well, we are very sorry about David. He was a good man." The words were correct, but delivered with all the emotional depth of a grocery store sympathy card. No mention of their absence at the funeral. No explanation for the 2 weeks of silence. "How is the girl?" my mother asked, avoiding Lily's name, as she often did, as if her granddaughter were a distant acquaintance. "Lily," I emphasized, "is still in a coma, but showing small signs of improvement. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "That is good," my father nodded. "Children are resilient." An awkward silence followed as we sat in the living room. My mother's eyes darted around, taking in the unwashed coffee cups and pile of mail on the side table. My father fidgeted with his wedding band, twisting it around his finger. "We heard about the settlement," he finally said, his voice shifting to the business-like tone he typically reserved for financial discussions. I froze. "How did you hear about that?" "Margaret called us," my mother replied, referring to a distant cousin who worked at an insurance company. "She mentioned the trucking company offered a very generous sum. 7 figures, she heard." The fact that they were discussing my private financial matters with extended family while not bothering to call me directly sent a wave of nausea through me. "Margaret should not have shared that information," I said coldly. "And it is not something I want to discuss." "Actually, that is why we came," my father continued, ignoring my discomfort. "We wanted to talk about the settlement and how it might benefit the family." "Benefit the family?" I repeated, not comprehending. My mother leaned forward. "We think, as your parents and Lily's grandparents, we should be entitled to a portion of the settlement. 50% would be fair, we believe." The words hung in the air like toxic gas. I could not have been more shocked if they had physically slapped me. "You want half of the money from the death of my husband." My voice sounded distant, as if someone else were speaking. "It is not just about the money," my father said unconvincingly. "We have had some financial setbacks recently. The market has not been kind to our investments. And Timothy is starting a new business venture that needs capital." "Timothy needs money for a business," I echoed hollowly. "And that is why you think you deserve half of the compensation for my husband's death and my daughter's injuries." "We are family," my mother said, as if that explained everything. "Families help each other in times of need. And right now, we need financial assistance." "In times of need," I repeated. "Like when my husband died and my daughter was critically injured, and you could not be bothered to leave a birthday party." My mother had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before rallying. "That was unfortunate timing. We had guests' commitments. Timothy would have been devastated if we had left." "Devastated," I whispered. "Unlike me, who was merely widowed and possibly about to lose my child." "You are being dramatic," my father said dismissively. "You have always been oversensitive. Besides, you have your job at the hospital, and that life insurance policy David must have had. The settlement is extra money that could help all of us." "Extra money," I repeated, still struggling to process their audacity. "For my daughter's ongoing medical care and uncertain future, for the loss of her father. That kind of extra money." "We are not asking for all of it," my mother said, as if that were a generous concession. "Just half. We are thinking of using some to help Timothy open that microbrewery he has been talking about. It is a solid investment opportunity." The mention of my brother's brewery dreams, while my daughter lay comatose in a hospital bed, broke something inside me. A cold clarity washed over me, erasing any lingering hope that my parents were capable of genuine love or empathy. "Did you bring anything for Lily?" I asked suddenly. "A card. A stuffed animal. Anything at all to show your only granddaughter that you care? She is fighting for her life." They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We thought it best to sort out the financial matters first," my father said. "We can stop at the gift shop tomorrow before visiting her." "If she even recognizes you," I said bitterly. "She has seen you, 3 times in her entire life?" "That is hardly fair," my mother protested. "We live in a different state. Phones exist. Video calls exist. Airplanes exist," I countered. "You chose to be absent." My father's patience was visibly wearing thin. "Look, Samantha, we did not come here to rehash old grievances. We came to discuss the settlement. As your parents, we believe we have a right to be considered in the distribution of these funds." "A right?" I repeated. "Based on what exactly?" "Your unwavering support during this crisis, your presence at David's funeral, your concern for Lily's recovery." "Based on the fact that we are family," my mother insisted, her voice rising, "and family takes care of each other." "When has that ever applied to me?" I asked quietly. "When have you ever put my needs or Lily's above Timothy's?" "There you go again, always competing with your brother," my mother sighed. "We love you both equally, but Timothy needs extra support right now." The familiar refrain nearly made me laugh. Timothy always needed extra support, whether it was for his mediocre grades, failed relationships, or repeated career changes. "I think you should consider selling this house," my father suggested, looking around critically. "It is too big for just you and Lily now. You could downsize, free up some equity, maybe even move back to Minneapolis to be closer to family." The casual suggestion that I sell the home David had lovingly restored, where every corner held memories of our happy family, was the final straw. "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me," my mother looked affronted. "Get out of my house, now." "Samantha, do not be ridiculous," my father started. I said, "Get out." My voice rose to a shout. "You did not come here out of love or concern. You came for money. Money from my husband's death. What kind of people are you?" They stared at me, genuinely shocked by my outburst. I had never spoken to them this way before, had always swallowed my hurt and disappointment to keep the peace. "We will give you time to calm down," my mother said stiffly, rising from the sofa. "Obviously, you are not thinking clearly right now." "I have never thought more clearly in my life," I replied, my voice shaking with rage. "Get out, and do not come back until you are ready to be actual parents and grandparents, not opportunists looking for a payday from my tragedy." As they gathered their coats, my father made one last attempt. "Just think about what we have said. Timothy's business could be very successful with the right investment. It could benefit Lily in the long run." I walked to the side table where I had placed a framed photo of David and Lily taken just weeks before the accident. They were at the park, David pushing Lily on a swing, both laughing in the sunshine. I thrust it into my father's hands. "This is what your greed costs. This is what Lily lost. This is the reality of that settlement money." For the first time, I saw something crack in my father's composed facade. He stared at the photo, the color draining from his face, as if he were finally seeing the human cost behind the dollar signs. My mother peered over his shoulder, her lips parting slightly in shock. "Lily might never fully recover," I continued, my voice breaking. "She might have brain damage, physical disabilities, trauma she will carry forever. David is gone. His body was so broken they recommended a closed casket. That money will never replace what we lost. Never." The photograph trembled in my father's hands. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed genuine regret in his eyes, but he quickly handed the frame back to me, his emotional walls rebuilding. "We will talk when you are more rational," he said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. They left without another word, the door closing behind them with a finality that felt strangely liberating. I sank to the floor, still clutching the photograph, exhausted, yet somehow lighter. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to them. For the first time, I had named their behavior for what it was: cruel, selfish, and utterly without empathy. As their rental car pulled away, I realized I had finally stopped hoping for the parents I deserved and accepted the reality of who they actually were. The knowledge was painful, but freeing, like setting down a heavy burden I had carried my entire life. I needed to get back to Lily, to the hospital, where people genuinely cared about us. I placed the photo carefully on the mantel and left the empty house behind my steps, purposeful, as I walked toward the only family that mattered now. My parents did not immediately leave Seattle as I had expected. Instead, they showed up at the hospital the following morning, catching me off guard as I sat beside Lily's bed, reading her favorite book aloud. Their appearance in the doorway of the ICU room sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Martha, David's mother, sensed my tension and stood protectively near Lily's bed. "We brought a gift," my mother announced, holding out a generic teddy bear with a get-well-soon ribbon that still had the hospital gift shop price tag attached. "Thank you," I said stiffly, taking the bear and placing it on the windowsill among the dozens of thoughtful gifts from Lily's classmates, my colleagues, and David's friends, a pale offering in comparison. My father stared at Lily's small form, the tubes and monitors surrounding her, with an expression I could not quite read. For a moment I thought I detected genuine concern, but it was quickly replaced by his usual clinical detachment. "The doctors say she is improving," I offered, not sure why I was still trying to build bridges they consistently burned. "Good, good," my father nodded, his eyes darting to the medical equipment as if assessing its value. Martha excused herself, squeezing my shoulder supportively as she left, understanding I needed space for this confrontation. The room felt smaller with just the three of us and Lily's unconscious form. "We have been thinking about our conversation yesterday," my mother began, her voice artificially gentle. "We understand you are under tremendous stress right now." "I am glad you recognize that," I replied cautiously. "And we realize our timing could have been better," she continued. "Perhaps we should have waited to discuss the financial arrangements." Not that the request was wrong, just the timing. The distinction did not escape me. However, my father interjected: "The fact remains that family needs to support each other through difficult times. We are willing to reduce our request to 30% of the settlement instead of 50%. That seems more than fair." I stared at them in disbelief. They had interpreted my outrage as a negotiating tactic rather than a fundamental rejection of their entitlement. "You still do not understand," I said quietly, mindful of Lily and the hospital setting. "This is not about percentages. This is about the fact that you see my tragedy as a financial opportunity." "That is not fair, Samantha," my mother protested. "We are thinking about the family as a whole." "No, you are thinking about Timothy, as always," I corrected her. "Be honest, at least. This has nothing to do with me or Lily." My father sighed impatiently. "Timothy has an actual business plan. He needs capital. This money could grow with the right investment, benefit everyone in the long run. Everyone except David, who is dead. Everyone except Lily, who might need specialized care for years." "You are being melodramatic," my mother said dismissively. "The doctors said she is improving." "Improving does not mean she will fully recover," I explained, my nursing training kicking in. "She could have permanent cognitive impairments, physical disabilities, emotional trauma. We do not know yet." "Well, all the more reason to ensure the family has financial stability," my father countered, as if this strengthened his argument. "If Timothy's business succeeds, we would all benefit." I looked at Lily, her peaceful face betraying nothing of the battle her brain was fighting, and something crystallized within me. This moment was not just about the money, or even their callous response to David's death. It was about a lifetime of conditional love, of never being enough, of always coming second to Timothy's needs and wants. "I want to show you something," I said, pulling out my phone. I scrolled to photos taken the day after the accident, pictures I had taken for the wrongful death lawsuit. Photos of David's car crushed beyond recognition. Photos of Lily immediately after surgery, her head shaved and bandaged, her tiny body connected to more tubes than seemed possible. Photos I had not shown anyone else because they were too painful, too private. I handed the phone to my father. "This is what that settlement is for. This destruction, this pain. This is what happened while you were celebrating Timothy's birthday." My father's hands trembled as he scrolled through the images, my mother peering over his shoulder with a hand pressed to her mouth. The clinical hospital lighting cast harsh shadows on their faces, highlighting the shock I had finally managed to break through their self-absorption. My husband died instantly. The truck hit his side directly. The paramedics said he never felt pain. My voice was steady now, each word deliberate. Lily was thrown against her window so hard her skull fractured in 3 places. They had to remove a piece of her skull to relieve the pressure on her brain. That is what the settlement is for. I took back the phone and pulled up different photos. David at Lily's kindergarten graduation, beaming with pride. The 3 of us at Mount Rainier last summer, snow-capped peaks behind our smiling faces. David teaching Lily to ride a bike, his hand steadying her back. Our last Christmas together, matching pajamas and sleepy morning smiles. And this is what we lost. This is what money cannot replace. This is what Lily will grow up without. My mother had tears in her eyes now, whether from genuine emotion or manipulation I could not tell. My father looked away, focusing on the monitors above Lily's bed. "We were not asking for the entire settlement," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Would you have come if there was no money involved?" I asked directly. "Would you be here right now if there was no settlement to claim a portion of—" Their silence was answer enough. "I have spent my entire life trying to earn your love." I continued, the words flowing now after decades of suppression. "Working for straight, as becoming a nurse, marrying a good man, giving you a grandchild. Nothing was ever enough to match Timothy's mediocrity." "That is not true," my mother protested weakly. "It is, and we all know it," I insisted. "When I called you sobbing that David was dead and Lily might die too, you chose a birthday party over supporting your daughter. That tells me everything I need to know about my place in your lives." My father shifted uncomfortably. "That was a mistake," he admitted. "We should have come immediately." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "But you did not. And now you are here with your hand out, wanting to profit from my loss." I looked at Lily, drawing strength from her quiet presence. "I want you to leave now. I want you to go back to Minneapolis and really think about what kind of parents and grandparents you want to be. Because right now, you are not welcome in our lives." "You cannot keep us from our granddaughter," my mother said, a note of panic in her voice. "I can, and I will, if that is what it takes to protect her," I replied calmly. "I will not let her grow up feeling like I did, constantly trying to earn conditional love that never comes. She deserves better." I deserved better. My father stood abruptly. "You are upset. We understand that. We will give you some time to think more rationally about this situation." "I am thinking perfectly rationally," I assured him. "For the first time in my life, I see our family dynamic with complete clarity, and I am choosing to break the cycle." "What does that mean?" my mother asked, her voice small. "It means I am no longer available for the role I have always played, the understanding daughter who accepts less than she deserves. It means Lily and I are a package deal, and access to her requires genuine love and respect for both of us. It means Timothy's needs do not automatically outrank ours." I stood up, physically positioning myself between them and Lily's bed, in a protective stance that was both literal and symbolic. "You have a choice to make," I told them. "You can leave here and continue as you always have, prioritizing Timothy and treating me as an afterthought. Or you can do the hard work of examining your behavior and making real changes. But either way, you will get exactly 0% of the settlement." "This is not how we raised you to speak to us," my father said, his face flushing with anger. "No, you raised me to accept crumbs and be grateful for them. I am not doing that anymore." Martha appeared in the doorway, likely having overheard the rising voices. "Is everything all right in here?" she asked, her protective grandmotherly instinct evident. "My parents were just leaving," I said firmly. My mother opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. Something in my expression must have conveyed the futility of further discussion. For once in my life, I was immovable. They left without another word, my father's back rigid with indignation, my mother casting one last look at Lily before following him out. Martha moved to my side and wrapped an arm around my shoulders as we watched them walk down the hospital corridor. "I am proud of you," she whispered. "David would be too." The tears came then, not of grief or anger, but of release. I had finally stood up for myself, for Lily, for the family David and I had created. I had named the dysfunction that had shadowed my entire life and refused to accept it any longer. As Martha held me, I felt a small pressure on my other hand. I looked down to see Lily's fingers twitching against mine, her eyelids fluttering slightly. "Lily," I gasped. "Martha, get the nurse!" That moment marked two profound awakenings, my daughter beginning her journey back to consciousness, and my own emergence from a lifetime of emotional subjugation. Whatever came next, we would face it together, surrounded by people who truly loved us, not those who merely claimed the title of family without earning it. The day Lily first opened her eyes remains the most profound moment of my life after losing David. It happened gradually, a flutter of eyelids, a squeeze of fingers, a small moan that sent me lunging for the call button. The medical team rushed in, performing quick assessments as Lily struggled toward consciousness. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed days earlier. "I am right here, baby," I assured her, tears streaming down my face. "Mommy is right here." "Where is Daddy?" she asked, the innocent question shattering my momentary joy. How do you tell a 7-year-old that her father is gone forever? The child psychologist advised honesty, delivered with age-appropriate simplicity. So I held her hand and told her that Daddy had been hurt too badly in the accident and had gone to heaven, that he loved her very much and would always watch over her, that it was okay to be sad and angry, that I was sad and angry too. She cried, her small body shaking with sobs that worried me given her head injury, but the doctors assured me emotional release was normal and necessary. I crawled into the hospital bed beside her, holding her as we grieved together, the first of countless times we would comfort each other in the months ahead. The neurological tests revealed both miracles and challenges. Lily's speech and memory remained largely intact, extraordinary given the severity of her injuries. However, the damage to her motor cortex left her right side significantly weakened. She would need extensive physical therapy to relearn walking and fine motor skills. The cognitive testing showed subtle processing delays that might affect her learning. "She is young, which works in her favor," Dr. Chen explained. "The pediatric brain has remarkable plasticity. With consistent therapy and support, she can regain many functions. Some deficits may remain permanent, but she can learn to adapt." We established a new routine centered around Lily's recovery. Mornings in physical therapy, afternoons with speech and occupational therapists, evenings reading together in her hospital room. David's parents returned to Florida, but called daily, sending care packages and arranging for relatives to visit. My colleagues rotated shifts to sit with Lily, when I needed to handle funeral paperwork, insurance claims, and the growing mountain of medical bills. The settlement from the trucking company was processed with unexpected speed, the company eager to avoid negative publicity. The insurance agent who delivered the check looked uncomfortable, aware that no amount of money could compensate for our losses. Still, the financial security it provided removed one significant stressor, allowing me to take an extended leave of absence from work to focus on Lily's recovery. My parents made no further attempts to contact us after our confrontation. No calls, no cards for Lily, no acknowledgement of the boundaries I had established. Their silence was both painful and liberating, the final confirmation that their love had always been conditional, available only when convenient or beneficial to them. Timothy, however, called a month after Lily woke up. His voice was hesitant, almost sheepish. "Mom and Dad told me what happened," he said, "about David and Lily, and about, well, them asking for money." "Did they tell you they chose your birthday party over coming when David died?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. His pause told me they had omitted that detail. "No, they did not mention that part. Jesus, Samantha, I am so sorry. If I had known, I would have told them to go." For the first time, I heard what sounded like genuine regret in my brother's voice. It occurred to me that Timothy, for all his privilege in our family dynamic, was also a product of our parents' dysfunction. "It is not your fault," I said finally. "You did not create the situation." Still, I should have called sooner. I just did not know what to say. "There is nothing anyone can say that fixes this," I acknowledged. "But showing up helps. Acknowledging the loss helps." "How is Lily doing?" he asked. I gave him an honest update on her condition, the challenges ahead, the small victories we celebrated. He listened without interrupting, without offering empty platitudes. When I finished, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Listen, about that brewery thing, I want you to know. I never asked them to get money from you. That was their idea, not mine. I would never want money from something so awful." "I believe you," I said, surprised to find I actually did. Timothy had been spoiled and favored, but he had never been intentionally cruel. "Can I maybe send Lily something, a gift or a card or whatever might help?" She would like that, I agreed. She is especially enjoying art therapy right now. Anything creative would be welcome. 2 weeks later, a large package arrived, containing a complete set of professional quality art supplies, a dozen how-to-draw books for kids, and a handwritten card from Timothy expressing love for his niece. It was more thoughtfulness than I had expected from my brother, a small bridge extending across the family chasm. Lily came home after 2 months in the hospital, our house modified to accommodate her wheelchair and the equipment for her ongoing therapy. The transition was challenging for both of us. The empty space where David should have been felt more acute at home among his belongings, his projects, his presence that lingered in every room. Lily had nightmares, crying out for her father. I would hold her through the night, my own tears mingling with hers. Friends and neighbors rallied around us with practical support. Karen next door installed a ramp over our front steps. Marcus, David's best friend, finished the treehouse. David had been building for Lily, adapting it to be accessible when she grew stronger. My hospital colleagues organized a rotation to help with Lily's therapy exercises and medical needs. The settlement money allowed me to hire specialized therapists who came to our home, reducing the exhausting trips to outpatient facilities. I established a trust fund for Lily's future medical needs and education, ensuring she would always have financial security regardless of her abilities. Some went toward adapting our home with wider doorways, a roll-in shower, and other accessible features. 6 months after the accident, Lily took her first unassisted steps in physical therapy, a wobbly but determined journey across the padded mat. The video I captured of that moment became my most treasured possession, her face lighting up with triumph as the therapist cheered. That night I sat beside her bed long after she fell asleep, telling David's photo about her accomplishment, certain that somehow he knew. A year passed, marked by painful firsts. The first Christmas without David, the first of Lily's school performances, he would never see his birthday spent at the cemetery, with flowers and quiet tears. We established new traditions to honor his memory, an annual picnic at his favorite park, a Christmas ornament selected each year to represent him. I kept his architectural awards displayed prominently, showing Lily photos of the buildings he had designed around Seattle. "Your daddy helped build our city," I would tell her. "His work makes people's lives better every day." Timothy visited twice that year, awkward but genuine in his efforts to build a relationship with Lily. He never mentioned our parents during these visits, though I knew they must ask about us. He brought thoughtful gifts for Lily, and once, unexpectedly, a framed architectural drawing of David's that he had tracked down from a former colleague, a gesture that moved me to tears. My parents made one attempt at contact, a formal email suggesting a fresh start now that emotions had settled. The message made no mention of their previous behavior, no acknowledgement of hurt, caused no real apology. I responded simply that I remained open to a relationship based on respect and genuine care, but that required accountability for past actions. They never replied. Lily's recovery progressed in fits and starts. Her right leg remained weaker than her left, requiring a brace for stability. Her fine motor skills improved enough to return to drawing, though her once precise lines were now somewhat shaky. Cognitive testing showed processing delays that qualified her for an individualized education plan at school. Each challenge was met with determination, her resilience a daily inspiration. "She is so much like David," Martha commented during one of her visits. That same quiet stubbornness, that refusal to give up. It was true. Lily had inherited her father's tenacity along with his warm brown eyes and creative spirit. Watching her push through difficult therapy sessions, I saw David's determination reflected in her small face. It was both comforting and heartbreaking. By the second anniversary of the accident, we had established a new normal. I returned to work part-time, finding healing in helping other families navigate medical crises. Lily attended school with support services, making friends despite her differences. We joined a support group for families affected by traumatic brain injury, finding community, among others who understood our specific challenges. Part of the settlement went toward establishing a small scholarship in David's name at his former university, awarded annually to an architecture student focused on accessible design. Another portion funded a playground designed specifically for children with mobility challenges, built in a park near our home. These tributes gave meaning to our loss, transforming private pain into public good. Timothy's brewery eventually opened without our parents' investment. He invited us to the grand opening, where he had dedicated a quiet corner with comfortable seating as Lily's nook, complete with a small bookshelf and art supplies. It was a thoughtful gesture that suggested he was growing beyond our parents' influence. The journey of grief is not linear. Some days were almost normal, filled with Lily's laughter and small victories. Others brought me to my knees with the weight of absence. The future David would never see, the milestones he would miss. I learned to make space for both realities, to hold joy and sorrow simultaneously, to parent through my pain. And always I remembered the moment I finally stood up for myself in that hospital room, refusing to accept less than we deserved. That moment of clarity, painful as it was, had freed me from a lifetime of seeking approval that would never come. In losing David, I had found a strength I never knew. I possessed a fierce protectiveness that would ensure Lily grew up knowing her worth was never in question. 3 years after the accident that changed everything, Lily and I stood at the ribbon cutting for the new accessible playground funded partly by our settlement money. At 10 years old, Lily still walked with a slight limp and wore a brace on her right leg for longer activities, but she had defied many of the early cautious prognoses. Her cognitive delays remained requiring extra time for processing information and special accommodations at school, but her artistic talent had flourished her drawings, now hanging in a local pediatric therapy center. "Daddy would love this place," she said, surveying the playground, designed to accommodate children of all abilities. The plaque near the entrance bore David's name and a quote from one of his interviews about architecture creating spaces where everyone belongs. Yes, he really would. I agreed, watching, as Lily's physical therapist Lisa helped her navigate the adaptive swing set, designed specifically for children with mobility challenges. The 3 years since losing David had transformed us both. Grief had carved new channels through our lives, reshaping our identities and relationships. The pain never disappeared entirely, but it had evolved from the raw, consuming agony of those early days into something more manageable, a companion, rather than a destroyer. My relationship with my parents remained distant and formal. After their initial silence following our confrontation, they eventually sent a carefully worded letter expressing regret for any misunderstandings, but stopping short of a genuine apology. I responded with clear boundaries. They were welcome to be part of Lily's life if they could demonstrate consistent, unconditional care for both of us. Our interaction now consisted of birthday cards, occasional phone calls, and brief supervised visits once or twice a year. These visits were civil but lacking warmth, my parents seemingly unsure how to relate to us without their familiar patterns of favoritism and emotional manipulation. They never again mentioned the settlement money, though I sometimes caught my father eyeing our home improvements with calculating glances. Timothy surprisingly had become a more genuine presence in our lives. Free from the competitive dynamic our parents had fostered, we developed a relationship based on mutual respect rather than rivalry. His brewery featured a wall of Lily's artwork, and he had become a reliable uncle, remembering her school events and celebrating her therapy milestones. "I think losing David made me realize what actually matters," he confided during one visit. "Mom and Dad are still the same, always focused on appearances and achievements. But you and Lily showed me there is more to family than that." The settlement money, which had caused such conflict, had been carefully managed to secure Lily's future. A trust fund would cover her ongoing medical needs and education, including college, if she chose that path. The accessible modifications to our home had made daily life easier as she progressed from wheelchair to walker to occasional independent walking. A portion had been set aside for potential future surgeries that might improve her mobility as she grew. Beyond our immediate needs, the settlement had allowed us to create meaningful legacies in David's memory. The architecture scholarship at his alma mater had already supported 5 promising students. The accessible playground provided inclusion for children previously sidelined by traditional equipment. These tangible contributions to the world felt like extensions of David's compassionate spirit. My own healing journey had been nonlinear, filled with unexpected triggers and breakthroughs. In the second year after his death, I joined a grief support group and finally allowed myself to process the anger I had suppressed, not just at the truck driver who took David's life, but at my parents for their lifelong emotional neglect. The validation from others who understood complex family dynamics was transformative. "Family is who shows up" became my mantra, a simple truth learned through painful experience. And people had shown up for us in extraordinary ways. Martha and George, despite their advanced age and health challenges, visited regularly and called Lily weekly. My hospital colleagues had organized meal trains during Lily's recovery. David's architectural firm had established a paid internship in his name and continued to include us in company events. Our neighbors had become extended family, helping with everything from yard work to emergency childcare. These connections formed a tapestry of support far stronger than the fragile threads that had bound me to my parents. I had stopped trying to earn love from those incapable of giving it freely, and instead embraced the genuine care offered by our chosen family. On Lily's most recent birthday, she asked to visit David's grave, something she rarely requested. We brought his favorite sunflowers and sat together on the small bench I had installed beside his headstone. "I think Daddy would be proud of us," she said, arranging the flowers carefully with her still somewhat awkward right hand. "Why do you think that, sweetie?" I asked. "Because we did not give up. And we did not let the sad stuff make us mean." Her simple wisdom took my breath away. Despite everything she had lost, despite the ongoing challenges she faced, my daughter had grasped something profound about resilience and character that many adults never understand. "You are absolutely right," I told her. "Daddy would be so proud of the person you are becoming." That evening, as I tucked her into bed, Lily asked the question she revisited periodically as her understanding of loss evolved. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever be different?" I considered my answer carefully, balancing honesty with hope. People can change if they truly want to, but it is very hard to change patterns that have existed for a long time. What matters is that we know our own worth, whether they see it or not. She nodded thoughtfully. "I am glad Uncle Timothy changed." "Me too, sweetie. And I am glad we have Martha and George and Lisa and Marcus and everyone who helps us." "Our chosen family," I smiled, kissing her forehead. "Our real family," she corrected sleepily. The wisdom in her simple redefinition moved me to tears. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, Lily was growing into a person of remarkable insight and compassion. The accident had taken so much from her, yet had not diminished her capacity for love and gratitude. In the quiet of her room, surrounded by the artwork that represented her ongoing healing, I reflected on the journey we had traveled. The settlement money that my parents had so callously demanded had indeed transformed our lives, but not in the way they had envisioned. It had provided security, yes, but more importantly, it had funded the therapies that helped Lily recover, created lasting tributes to David's memory, and given us the freedom to redefine family on our own terms. The greatest transformation, however, had nothing to do with money. It was the discovery of my own voice after a lifetime of silence, the courage to establish boundaries after years of accommodation, the freedom found in releasing the need for approval from those incapable of giving it. In losing David, I had been forced to find strength I never knew I possessed. In fighting for Lily's recovery, I had learned advocacy skills that served others through my work. In confronting my parents, I had finally broken free of patterns established in childhood, ensuring Lily would grow up, knowing her inherent worth was never in question. The settlement money had secured our future, but standing up for ourselves had saved our souls. As I look back on that terrible day when I called my parents with the worst news of my life, only to be told they were too busy with Timothy's birthday party, I no longer feel only pain. I feel gratitude for the clarity it provided, painful as it was. Sometimes the most devastating moments illuminate truths we have been unable to see. Sometimes losing what we thought we needed reveals what truly matters. Family, I have learned, is not defined by DNA, but by love in action. It is shown in hospital vigils and middle-of-the-night phone calls, in remembered birthdays and respected boundaries, in celebrating victories and sitting with pain. It is built choice by choice, day by day, in the thousand small moments when people show up for each other without calculation or condition. That is the legacy I am building for Lily. not perfection, not protection from all hardship, but the unshakable knowledge that she is worthy of authentic love, the wisdom to recognize it when offered, and the courage to walk away when it is withheld. Have you ever had to redefine family in your own life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our journeys helps others find their way through similar struggles. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that family is a matter of behavior, not just blood. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth is never dependent on those who fail to see it.